It's the Resistance Report for February 20th, 2017. Good evening. First of all, happy President's Day, or as some of you are demonstrating and showing, not my President's Day. There are rallies, not my President's rallies in several dozen American cities today. And many of you have made a very clear point and are continuing to make the clear point that Donald Trump doesn't deserve to be president, that he is in fact an illegitimate president. We've also seen in the last few days a general strike, rallies with regard to immigration and immigrant rights. And we have also seen, and will see more, people going to congressional town halls. And even if your member of Congress does not hold a town hall, many people are nevertheless holding a town hall in his or her name. And if she has been invited or he has been invited and will not show up, having an empty chair, inviting the press, making a major political statement about the failure of your member of Congress even to have the accountability, decency, and interest to show up in your congressional district in this recess. It is congressional recess. This is when, in fact, traditionally, members of Congress do have town halls. They meet with their constituents. That's what democracy is all about, meeting with constituents, being responsive to constituents, being accountable to constituents. But if your members of Congress do not want to do that, then maybe they don't deserve to be your members of Congress. And that is why it is so important to take advantage of this congressional recess to hold them accountable. I hope you're doing so. I urge you again to check in with indivisibleguide.com and see where your member of Congress is likely to be, and if your member of Congress is not going to be there, where various people are holding meetings to make your member of Congress accountable and inviting the press. At yesterday's, or at least Saturday's, rally, and there was a Donald Trump rally organized by Donald Trump on Saturday, he railed at the press, he railed at the courts, he railed at anybody that criticizes him. This is all old stuff by now. He also did something else that surprised a lot of people. He implied that immigrants from Sweden had, the night before, undertaken a terrorist act in Sweden. Donald Trump was trying to make his point that the press and the courts and everyone else who has tried to resist Donald Trump's ban on travel from 7 predominantly Muslim nations into the United States are risking the well-being of Americans. And so he pointed to terrorist attacks in Nice and in Paris and also again in Sweden. But it turns out there was no terrorist attack in Sweden. And when notified of that the next day, yesterday, Donald Trump said that he had relied on Fox News. And Fox News had said that there was a surge in criminal activity in Sweden after Sweden took in a number of refugees. And that he didn't intend to be understood to be referring to terrorists. Well, even then, Donald Trump, it turns out, was on very, very thin ice, because there was not even an upsurge, according to Swedish data, in criminal activity in Sweden as a result of Sweden taking in refugees. And also, it wasn't clear why Donald Trump had not checked in even with U.S. intelligence, with his national security people, although there are not too many of them in the White House. But he hadn't checked in with any advisor. He just checked in with Fox News. Do we have a president who is making public statements now about American security based on what he hears on Fox News? Apparently that's the case. Well, when he was criticized for relying on Fox News and for making a statement about criminality and a surge in criminality in Sweden based on immigration, what did Donald Trump do? He issued a tweet this morning. The fake news media, he accused them, is trying to say that large-scale immigration in Sweden is working out just beautifully. Not capital letters. It's the same pattern, folks. Donald Trump lies. When he's caught in the lie, he gets outraged and he blames the messengers. And it doesn't matter how blatant his lie is. And he changes the subject, and then he blames the messengers again. He blames the press. He blames the courts. He blames Sweden. It's not clear whether his behavior is a product after 4 weeks of his presidency, of his being, let's put it delicately, unhinged, or whether he simply is exercising a plan hatched by some of his advisors, such as Stephen Bannon, to discredit the press, discredit the courts, leave Donald Trump the last remaining authority. That's what authoritarianism is, after all about. Which gets us to a new report in the New York Times. I hope you had a chance to see it. If not, I want to just give you it in summary, because it is disturbing in terms of authoritarianism and Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. A week before, Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, was fired, or resigned, as the case may be, he received a sealed envelope. And in that envelope was advice to Donald Trump and to Michael Flynn about how to lift sanctions on Russia. How to do it politically, how to do it administratively, how to do it in a way that presumably the Trump administration could get away with. Now, that memo delivered to Michael Flynn, according to the New York Times, came from 3 individuals. And it's important you know these individuals, because I believe they're going to figure very prominently as the investigation proceeds as to connections between Donald Trump and his aides during the campaign and Russian operatives. One of those people was named Michael Cohen. He is Trump's personal lawyer and business associate. He has been scouting deals for Trump in Russia for many, many years, including a Trump-branded tower in the Soviet Republic of Georgia before the fall of the Berlin Wall, a short-lived mixed martial arts venture starring a Russian fighter, and other ventures. Cohen is one of several Trump associates now under scrutiny by the FBI. Trump associate Michael Cohen got this memo to Michael Flynn. Also from Felix Sater, a second person, a Russian-American longtime business associate of Donald Trump's, executive of the Bayrock Group, which is 2 floors below the Trump Organization in Trump Tower. Sater had been working on a plan for a Trump Tower in Moscow. And finally, the third person whose name was on the memo, according to the New York Times, is Andrei Artemenko. He's part of the pro-Putin faction in the Ukraine, a former associate of Paul Manafort, who you remember was Trump's campaign manager for a time during his campaign. Artemenko traveled to Cleveland during the Republican National Convention to meet Trump associates, political associates. Now keep those names in mind, Felix Sater, Michael Cohen, and Andrei Artemenko, because they, along with Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, and Rex Tillerson, are 6 people who are closely associated with Donald Trump and also closely associated with Vladimir Putin. The noose is tightening, folks. Finally, I want to give public commendation, kudos, a shout out to three people, two of them Republican senators and one an anchor on Fox News. The reason I'm doing this is because it takes enormous courage, given the pressure on Republican members of Congress, given the pressure on anchors of Fox News, the pressure to toe the line, the pressure not to criticize Donald Trump, the pressure not to be honest with the public about what's going on. And yet these three individuals did just that. Senator Lindsey Graham on CBS Face the Nation yesterday called a free press and independent judiciary the backbone of our democracy, responding to Donald Trump's attacks on the free press and independent judiciary. He said that they're worth fighting and dying for. He also said that what bothered him most about Trump was he never seems to forcefully embrace the idea that Russia interfered with the campaign. That's Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican senator from South Carolina. Also, we had over the weekend Republican John McCain on NBC Meet the Press saying, if you want to preserve democracy, he said, as we know it, you have to have a free and many times adversarial press. The first thing that dictators do is try to shut down the press. Now, he was very quick to add that he was not accusing Donald Trump of being a dictator. But anybody who listened to John McCain and listened to what he said was pretty obvious what John McCain was getting at and who he was talking about. Now, it is true that Lindsey Graham and John McCain have not exactly voted against the administration's, Donald Trump's, cabinet picks yet. Maybe they're holding their fire, I don't know. But I think it is important for us to give them as much positive reinforcement as possible. Every Republican who stands up to Trump deserves our thanks and our commendation. Fox News anchor Chris Wallace is the other one I wanted to commend. He said today that Trump's attack on the press on Friday, in which he called the media the enemy of the American people, crossed an important line, according to Chris Wallace. It crosses an important line. And the free functioning of a press is critical in a free democracy. You must have an independent press. Now, that's Fox News. Fox News has never been criticized by Donald Trump directly, at least since he's been president. He singles out ABC and NBC and CBS and CNN. He leaves Fox News alone, and yet here we have a major anchor on Fox News standing up for the freedom of the press. In order to resist Donald Trump, in order to impeach him or get rid of him under the 25th Amendment as not being competent to be president, Republicans have got to come along. Otherwise, it just looks like another partisan game. No matter how bad Trump is, it looks like partisanship, and it can be described as partisanship by Trump and his allies and his enablers. But when Republicans like Lindsey Graham and John McCain and others, and when commentators on Fox News begin to react as they are starting to react, then we have a chance of a nonpartisan, bipartisan resistance. And that, my friends, is the only way we are actually going to win. And now your questions. This is from Val King. With the administration taking so much news time, what are some nominations or bits or issues that are not getting as much attention as they should? Val, I think the things that are not getting enough attention are some of the quiet steps that Trump and his administration are taking that are being buried under his outrageous statements. For example, The Wall Street Journal carried a very important story yesterday, which nobody I've checked with seems to have read. And that is that Donald Trump and his administration are considering changing the way the trade deficit is calculated in the United States, so that imports that come into the United States that are unchanged and then go out to a neighboring country, Canada or Mexico, are counted as imports but not counted as exports when they leave. Now what that does, you see, is it makes our trade deficit much, much larger. If they succeed in making that little data change, and I can understand why people might have missed that, because your eyes glaze over. It sounds like just a little calculation. If they make that calculation, then Trump can say that the trade deficit is huge, much, much larger than it actually is, which will give him more grounds to do whatever he wants with regard to China or Mexico. It's in these details how government provides its facts, where there are gag orders, where there are attempts by Trump and his administration to alter reality, to distort the facts to fit his preconceived notions of what should be the facts, that we get into huge trouble. That is a bigger problem than even his big lies. That's what's not getting enough coverage. Richard Shopkis, what is the best way to motivate Republican members of Congress to uphold their duty to act as a check on the executive branch? Well, Richard, I think that one thing that we can do, all of us, particularly those of us who are constituents of, say, Senator McCain or Senator Graham or any other senator who is beginning to criticize Trump, is to give them our support and congratulations. It's the same with regard to courageous members of the press. I think we need to stand up and make sure they understand how grateful we are. Susan Clements, what do you think are the most important questions I should be asking my representatives at their town hall? Susan, you ought to ask, number one, how they are going to vote on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. Are they going to repeal it, or are they really going to replace it? And if they say that they're going to replace it, exactly how are they going to replace it? What are they going to do with regard to pre-existing conditions? How will they afford to provide coverage for people with pre-existing conditions if they are getting rid of the mandate that young and healthy people have got to sign up for health care coverage or face a substantial penalty? How are they going to provide all of the subsidies that people need for health care and health insurance if they are going to generate no tax dollars, because they are actually providing a huge tax break by repealing all of the taxes in the Affordable Care Act? I would also ask your representatives about immigration reform. Ask them about tax cuts and tax reforms, corporate tax reforms. What do they believe is actually coming down the pike with regard to tax cuts and tax cuts on the rich? Are they going to vote in favor of them? And if so, what's going to happen to the federal budget deficit? Ask them, are they going to preserve Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security? Ask them if they're going to preserve programs for the poor, programs for the middle class, job training. And then finally, ask them how they plan to pay for Trump's giant infrastructure project, which he is saying is a public-private partnership, but actually, when you look closely, is a big giveaway to very wealthy investors. Ask them about it. Hold them accountable. Sue Leonard, my representative isn't holding a town hall. What can I do? Well, Sue, you might look at our video on this page with regard to indivisibleguide.com and how you can hold your representative accountable. But what many people are doing around the country when their representatives, and many Republican representatives, are not choosing to have town halls during this recess. I can understand why, because they don't want to face their constituents, a lot of angry constituents. But if they're not, then what you can do is get together with others and advertising that there will be a town hall, invite your representative, and if your representative doesn't come, either have a cardboard cutout or a photograph sitting on a seat that is otherwise empty, and invite the press there and have a story about how your representative was invited and never showed. Lisa Holloway, is there any point in reporters continuing to attend and cover Trump's press conferences? Can they do more than just expose his lies? Well, Lisa, the problem, quite honestly, is that Trump uses his press conferences, at least his rallies, and the rallies and press conferences, he'd like to be the same thing, as opportunities for telling his big lies. His press conferences, the genuine press conferences in the White House, such as he did last Thursday, those press conferences are very, very important in terms of the press actually asking him questions and then follow-up questions when he clearly lies. They do. Reporters need to attend those press conferences because unlike the rallies, the pure rallies, such as Saturday's rallies, the press conferences give the press an opportunity to follow up, to ask Trump why he said what he said, particularly when what he said was completely fatuous or unmoored to any facts. That's where you get some degree of accountability. So yes, they must continue to attend. This is the last question from Marcia Jackson. I live in a very blue district. What can I do? Marcia, one thing you can do is connect with a purple district. That is a district around the country that is somewhat blue or somewhat red, but could go either way, and connect with the people in that district who want to make sure that that district does go blue, particularly if there is somebody representing the district who is very incompetent or not doing what the district needs and wants. There is a website called sisterdistrict.com. I've spoken with the organizers of this website. They're making huge progress. And what their goal is to enable you and other people in blue districts to find those purple districts that are good matches and where your time and energy and even perhaps your money can be used to help those purple districts go blue. It's called, there's also swingleft.org, another one that may be helpful to you. So it's sisterdistrict.corp.com and swingleft.org. The resistance is now moving into its fifth week. Donald Trump is moving into his fifth week. Many of us are demonstrating. Many of us are attending town halls. We are doing what we possibly can. But I want to urge you to focus not only on statements and demonstrations and petitions, but also on the hard, practical, strategic work of political organizing. Focusing on the 2018 midterm elections. Now, I say this because there is no guarantee whatsoever that Donald Trump is going to be impeached or the 25th Amendment is going to be invoked before the midterms. In fact, I would doubt it. These midterm elections are critically important for obvious reasons, because the people who oppose Donald Trump are mostly now almost exclusively Democrats. If Republicans get wise and they come around, so much the better. But for now, at least, the only way to effectuate the resistance is to get a Democratic Congress, House, and Senate. And although it's going to be very difficult, we must try. So the midterms coming up, the primaries that lead up to those midterms that are also coming up in just in a year's time, that doesn't, in political terms, that's not much time. Please get involved. And also at your state level. A lot of state legislatures now are dominated by Koch money, the Koch brothers' money, and those state legislatures are not acting in your interest. They are acting in the interests of the Koch brothers and ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, big business. So There is a lot to do behind and besides demonstrating and making statements and signing petitions. That's all very important, but you must do even more. It's a long slog, but it's necessary. That's the end of tonight's Resistance Report. I'll see you tomorrow.